Hello everyone, Colin Canet here for Woodwork Web. Today we're going to be making this router jig, and it does two things. You'll be able to make really nice tight dados with it, and you'll be able to make some slots, and we'll show you how to set it up and how to use it. And that's the kind of dados that you can expect from it. Very good machine. And for making slots, this is going to be really handy when we make some jigs later on. So stay with me and watch me make this dual-purpose router jig. Well, a good place to start out today is the table saw. We need to cut a couple of 6-inch strips off of this. It's a higher quality plywood, and I'm using one of my general purpose blades for this because it does a very nice cut on plywood. So I've already set the height of the blade to about a half tooth above the material. I've set the width, plugged in the dust collector, and we're all ready to go. Now I'm at the miter saw, and I've determined that the 6-inch wide pieces that I've cut, I need to cut them at 28 inches. But before I do that, I want to remind you, if you haven't already, to subscribe to my channel. I've been remiss in reminding people that for the last few videos. I've moved over to the router table because I now need to cut the slots for the top and the bottom end of the jig. I've just installed my spiral down bit, and now I'm ready to start cutting. So there's my router bit, and you'll also notice that I've got a stop block against the fence here, and the purpose of the stop block is to give me a place, because I have to raise this bit a couple of times and make 2 or 3 passes, so it'll give me a place that I know is going to be the same every time. But also it's a safety measure, because whenever you're doing a plunge on a router, it tends to want to push the piece backwards because that's the way the bit is spinning, and this way it'll help me allow me to push the bit, or to push the wood ahead. So let's get ready and do that cut. So there's my fancy new knobs, and these are the bolts that they're going to use. Now, these are round, and what we need to have is something oblong here. I think they're called T-bolts, but I'm not even sure. But I can't find them locally. I have to order them through the catalog, and it takes too long for me to wait for them. So I make my own. I buy these round ones at my local hardware store, and you know what? I just go to my grinder. I think these cost like about, I don't know, 80 cents each or something, and I just grind them down to the proper size. And I have a sizer that I check that with, and basically these will go underneath, and that we'll show you how they're going to lock, but they'll basically go down like that. And that's why these T-nuts here work so well, is because they're actually pulling, so the T-nut won't come off there. It doesn't look that pretty, but boy, it sure works great. So here's our jig all nice and dry and ready to go. And what I need to do now, there's one of our little knobs that we made. So what I need to do now is drill a hole through this, because this knob will go here and these bolts will come through from the other side and lock this center part down. So that will be the adjustable part of that. In the center, okay, there's our jig, and the T-bolts are going to go through there. Let's make sure this one goes. Yeah, good. Okay. If I drill a little bit of a slot on here, when those drop in there, they won't move around. Okay, let's see how that... Yeah, that's perfect. It's nice and snug. So to cut the slots in here for the external riders, I've made this little sled, and it's just a piece of plywood with some wood glued on it. Now, these little knobs, of course, work great, but you know what? They're a little bit of work, but you know, there's no reason why you couldn't use an ordinary wing nut and just use some washers under it, metal washers, or make some wooden washers. So just another option. And there's what the router bit looks like. And you can see the bearing. The bearing is going to ride against the sides of my jig, and then the cutters will cut the new wood. And you'll see how that happens, but that's what the bit looks like. Now, this jig can be used either this way or it can be used this way. It doesn't matter because the bearing is going to be riding on these pieces. What I need to do now is measure the wood that I'm going to be cutting, or the dado side that I'm going to be cutting, and it's as easy as doing this. And you butt it up like that, tighten the two knobs on each end. Now, as I mentioned earlier, depending on your router bit, you might need to use spacers, and that's what I've just worked on. I've just got some thin scrap metal, or scrap, thin scrap plywood in there, and now I can fasten mine down because I don't want it to move around. Okay, we're just about ready to cut, and I just want to double check. That fits in there nice. There we go. That's a little on the loose side. I'd like to see it a little bit tighter than that. We'll try another one. When you put your wood in, if you're not careful watching it, and I moved it so you can see that line there? This board is warped slightly, and if you put that board in and tighten this down, by the time you cut your slot, it's going to be flopping around, which is what mine did. So what I realized is you can't put an entire board in. What you need to do is to just put a piece in. You need to do each side individually, and it takes a little bit more time, but you get a much better cut. So I'll do this side, and you may have to recheck it. Then I would do this side. Oh, that's better. Maybe even a bit too tight. Yep, perfect. All right, for the next part, I've now installed my 1/4-inch spiral bit. Okay, so the way this works is I've got 2 thin strips, and those thin strips are equal to the T-bolt and the very narrow edge of that, because we're going to make a slot for that to run through. The first cut I'm going to make, I'm going to take my wood out here and I'm going to put both of them in one side, and that means the router will be over to my right as far as it will go, and that will give it a straight path all the way through. Then I'll stop, I'll move these pieces of wood over to this side and do the same thing, and now that will get the second path because the router's all the way over to this side. Then the final cut that I'm going to make is I'll put one on each side, and that's when the slot will cut all the way through. There we go. That's perfect. It fits in there nice and snug, moves up and down, just what we need for slots. Okay. Well, and there's our finished dual-purpose routering jig. And, you know, it took a little bit of tweaking. It took a few tests to get it to work properly. We had to do a little bit of work with it. But if you stuck with it like I did, I think you'll be pretty happy. And you know what? It's not complicated because it's adjustable, and because you're using with your router, you'll be able to do all sorts of things with it. And I'm pretty excited that it cuts the dados as tight as it does, but also that it cuts slots, and we're going to use that feature in some upcoming videos when we're making some other jigs. So I'm Colin Canet for Woodwork Web. Don't forget to stay watching.